in a time where safety's become the goal of everything. Yet the sense of real adventure is disappearing. Those are the words of today's guest, a man who set the world altitude record for the highest electric paramotor flight, who's flown hundreds of miles in a vintage open cockpit biplane, and who describes himself as an old soul living in a modern world. Welcome to the Silvercore podcast, Nathan James.
How's it going, everybody?
So, should I refer to you as Mr. Drifto or Sir Drifto?
Everybody recognized me as Sir Drifto, and that name, I guess, kind of rings a bell. Sometimes I shake my head on that one, but it works.
So I'm gonna have links in the description here, and people can check out your social media feed and what you're up to. But honestly, out of all the people on social media that I follow, if you aren't in the top place for the coolest Instagram account, you're definitely up there in the top 5. It's insane. The adventures that you're on, the cool vehicles, the planes, the motorcycles. I mean, you're living what most people would aspire to or dream of as kids, looking in these old magazines saying, man, one day I'd love to fly this plane or drive that car.
Thank you.
How'd you get into all that?
I appreciate those words. Life is short. That's the biggest thing I can take away from anything is just, you got to keep on pursuing those ideas that always resonate in your head. And for me, I guess that's worked all these years and prevented a lot of hospital visits somehow. And I don't know how.
Were you close to hospital visits at times? Surely with your adventures, there's been a couple of hospital visits.
There's been my fair share. But, when you think about I call it the risk to reward ratio, it's words that I live by in every single thing I do. That usually at some point in my 20s, the risk to reward ratio became inverse, where the risk was much higher than the reward. And because of that, a couple incidents I had a hospital visit. And the times that were behind it, I'm like, this wasn't a good idea. But over the course of the last few decades, it's shockingly that there hasn't been more.
One of the things that we do, Silvercore, we've got a club, we've got a private podcast that comes out every week. And members, they ask questions and stuff. And I had a question that came up just last week. And there was an individual moved to a new province. He's getting into hunting, but he's concerned about bears. And he's concerned about, he says, I know this is stupid when I write it down, but I've got this fear of, when I'm hiking, I yell out, hey bear. But when I'm hunting, I got to be stealthy and quiet.
Yes.
And so we talked about that relationship. When you're young, risk, it falls on you. If I mess up, it's on me. When you get older, you start got relationships and families, and that risk falls on everybody else around you, and there's a different balancing act that kind of happens. How do you look at risk and balance it?
So early on, it was kind of like, I'm just going for this and seeing what the results would happen. And that was a really big, I'd say, an outlook or I guess turn of events in my 20s. And I would either reanalyze after the fact. Great example is there were so many incidents when I was flying a paramotor, which is a powered paraglider early on. This would have been early 2010, 2011. There was so many moments in that time frame where I would be flying and I'd see the weather. And I clearly knew the weather was very questionable. This is either going to put you in the ground or this is going to put you in the stratosphere. I had either one. Yet I would still launch myself into the sky knowing that these conditions exist. Fast forward now, I'm going to analyze this weather. It's clearly not flyable, so I'm therefore not going to fly. Unlike in my 20s, I'm just going to go for it and hope for the best. It doesn't work always. And I think the older you get, you realize that I really analyze, is reward that much better than the risk involved in this? And, that could be a tall tale sign of getting older, even though I still do questionable things at this age. But in my 20s, there was no analyzing. I would just go for it because I was solely focused on the reward, at least what I thought was the grass is greener on the other side. It was
the idea of the... No. Did the idea of the risk ever enter your mind? Because I know when I was younger, growing up, my parents didn't think I'd live past 10. Then they said, well, maybe 17, that's going to be the number. You're not going to live past there. Because I wouldn't think about consequence, and I'd just do things. And somehow everything would just kind of turn out. Yeah. Does when you were younger, was that similar, or did you actually have an idea of what the risk could be, and you just do it anyways?
When I was younger, a great example is I was into dirt bikes when I was younger. And at that point, this was when a two-stroke motorcycle was still the new hot commodity before four strokes took over. And I had a Yamaha YZ80. I was 10 years old, 11 years
Mm.
old. It was an absolute rocket ship. There was a berm, and I looked at that berm, and I knew that I didn't know what the options were on the other side of that berm. And I remember this still stays with me. 30 years later, I'm like, I've analyzed that I have carried too much speed off this berm. Midpoint in the air, I realized at age 8, like this is gonna hurt. And I literally had a time frame of like where I waited for the impact. And it was the first time I had brought my
Mm.
parents out to watch me hit this particular area of this track. And I'm like, the consequences were high for that one. I was on crutches for weeks and weeks. And that still sticks with me to
Mm.
this day. In fact, I'd say that's a big angular point of, is this going to work or am I going to regret this? And it's all because of that first berm that I hit at Mach
Mm.
2, you know,
As one does
as one does.
at 8 on a two-stroke,
Yeah. And like,
fully in the power band, throwing it.
uh, and I mean, like for you, what did you have an early realization as in your youth that like this is going to have consequences behind my action?
No, I kind of, I guess I just believed your parents, right? I guess I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 10. I guess I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 17. So I don't know, like just live life. Like I guess I've got an uncle who I never met. He was blown up by a grenade, and he was Royal 22nd Regiment in
Oh my God.
Valcartier over in Quebec, and he, I guess, was a training drill. And
Oh,
later, I've learned that they actually did have faulty grenades. There was speculation whether he just held it out to the side, count one, two, three, throw, right, as opposed to what they're supposed to do, just pull, pin, throw.
yeah.
Anyways, I guess he lived for a couple of days with his side blown out and then passed. Never met him, but
Oh,
I guess that probably stood in my parents' mind because it was my dad's best friend and my mom's brother, and I I just figured, well, he lived to 22. I guess that's about a good age he can live to. So no, I just assume that that's the course of things. Stupidly, it never really entered. And as you start getting older, it was when I had a family, had kids of my own, I start thinking like, okay, hold on a second. Like I know I can do these things, but it's usually from my experience like running across train tracks and trains coming. I know I make it, but there's one time when Buddy, who was trying to keep up with me, he almost got clipped. And it's usually the people around you that don't have that narrow focus of winning that end up, maybe they have the losing in their head and they end up falling and tripping and having an incident. So that entered my head that my actions have consequence for the people around me.
I like that perception of things. I think it was heavily involved in my 20s where I questioned like, okay, you made it to 21, that's a benchmark. 25 was a benchmark. When I hit 30,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is weird. I should not be here. Like, there's so many situations that I was in that I was like, I shouldn't be here, and yet I'm still going. And then at 35, I'm like, oh man, am I actually going to make it to my older age? This isn't a good sign, And then it was. I wasn't trying to be morbid about it, but I was laughing. I'm like, there's no freaking way I'm still here, and yet the clock keeps on ticking. So I just I've
I
enjoyed the journey of life, and I would say the biggest thing that I would always look back at is regret is the worst feeling, especially in a man's life. I'm not saying it's not in a woman's life, but particularly for men, if there's certain aspects of regret, those feelings never fade, and especially with the when the regret is positioned in a way of past avenues that you could have taken in life or events or actually it's just simple things that you wish you had done because you hear about it. People on their deathbed. Do you have any regrets? And they list out
mm,
those things. And those are things that have stuck with them. The older people individuals that are like 80, 90, they're talking about regrets that were in the 20s. And that resonated with them
mm.
100% up until their end of lifetime. And so like for me, that always resonates. And yet I always counted every birthday that hit me. I'm like, I'm still here. This is This is weird.
I think it's one of those things that doesn't matter what path you choose, there's always going to be options, right? If I go this path, I give up that thing over here. There's never going to be the situation where a person has everything.
Yes.
And so I always look at regret as that balancing act too. Like I never want to live to regret. I never want to look back and say, man, I really wish I should have done that. And there are times I get into things and halfway through I want to quit, but I'm like, I don't want to look back at myself as a quitter. I might succeed, I do the thing, and I never do it again because I realized halfway through it wasn't for me, but I can't stop halfway. I have to keep pushing through. And then, I don't know, maybe it's an ADHD thing, then I'm on to the next thing, right? But
Yeah.
that that idea of contemplating your own mortality, uh, it does a couple things. It allows you to measure your day in a way that you can hopefully live without regrets. But it also, I find that you never truly feel quite as alive as when you're riding that knife's edge between one wrong decision could change everything. And those are the core memories that tend to stick out to me. Not the mundane of going through in safety. It's where I pushed myself, or that threat was real or perceived.
Yes.
It was real in my mind, and I pushed through anyways.
I like that. That's it's the pushing through. That's what makes the everlasting mark on your life's memory.
I watch young people and they do cold plunges and they will create situations of contrived hardship so that they can push themselves. Because I think innately, deep down, we as a species need to push ourselves and need to feel challenged. And more, we have all of these modern conveniences. If we want food, we can have whatever flavor of food we want delivered to our door within half an hour by DoorDash. If we want a certain item, it's just a push of a button, and Amazon's got it next day or next hour, depending on where you live. But I see these hardships that people are willingly putting themselves into.
You
From
remember
your experience, yeah, go on.
you remember like the perfect example is that remember that device that you'd put on your stomach and it was zap your abs? So you do nothing and they
Yes,
said get 8-minute abs. Like, why not do the sit-ups? But then they would like have the
right.
backpack taser system zapping them while they're working, and I'm like, what
The
direction are we
Dr.
going at
Hose.
with life? If you're doing this for your abs, what are you doing for your general meals or getting to like? I want to like examine what is in the mindset of I'm going to zap my abs so I get my workout, so I don't actually have to work out. Like what?
Well, the whole mental health industry is booming and it's doing very, very well and it's only getting better. And I think that, some people realize it, but a lot of people don't. They look at the end result as happiness. They look at the end result of having something, but if people stop and think about it, like is the happiness doesn't come from having generally, it comes from acquiring. So man, I'm excited. I really want to get a new lens for my camera. Blah, blah, blah. Right, go on. And you get this new lens and you're like, oh, that's a nice lens. I can use it. But look at that lens over there, right? And there's always this perpetual cycle forward in the same way of zapping your abs. Man, I'd be really happy if I had a six pack and I could walk down the beach. Well, the happiness, I think, comes from the pursuit of whatever it is. That's where it's all found. And I think that's why people are slowly starting to push themselves and to do these harder things. And even if it's contrived, even if you got this expensive plastic tub that you put in the backyard that's marketed as making you a certain way.
Yes.
But I got to wonder, what sort of hardship do you think every young man or young person should experience at least once?
Absolute chaos involved with high stress, and your optionality to get out of that situation is very minimal in how you handle and compose yourself under that pressure. A lot of times, I think in modern times, we have something that's the ease of a push of a button to make our life easier. Oh, this is difficult. I'm going to have somebody else handle the situation. And I think every young male, 18 or even 16, till they're 25, at one point needs to be put in a situation that either means life or death. If I don't bust my butt in this situation and find an outcome to survive this, like true survival, not oh, Denny's is closed. I'm going to go to IHOP. I mean, like, if you don't make the right decision making under pressure, and this could be it. And even though that seems like, wow, this seems a little bit drastic, when you're putting those in those type of situations, your mind and how you perceive every situation you're in completely changes. And what normally is a very high stress situation, it gets repeated again, becomes less stress and less stress. And before you know it, you have stuff that normally would send people over the edge, and you're like, this is a walk in the park. It's no big deal. It's literally, I wish I was put in more stressful situations in my youth, not so much to involve PTSD, but just to really conform how I handle and strategically dissolve this situation and make it work. I think that's a dying art. You think about in the World War II, 18-year-olds, people that weren't kids that weren't even 18, they're forging their name that they were 18, were eager to go fight. And they're put in these situations. And you look at the byproduct of those ones that did survive is the greatest generation. They work hard, they figure out solutions, they literally make a situation that would deem unfathomable work, and they survived and they grew and built these lives that, I don't know, they're go bys. I commonly hang out with a good friend of mine. He's 102 now, and in fact, not too long ago, we flew in my plane down south. He was a World War II fighter pilot, flew P-38s, Papua New Guinea, the most legendary guy, and I've known some amazing individuals, but he's 102. He still flies the Cessna 210 at 102, still has a current license. And I'm like, what has driven you to not only make it to this benchmark that is unfathomable, but you're with such his mental clarity, everything is there. He survived in a war that if I was flying a P-38 in Papua New Guinea and I got shot down, that's it. I mean, your survivability, even to be remotely located, but Papua New Guinea, and yet you had all these layers of stress throughout your life. You make it to 102, you're still going. That's like a staple go by book of what every young adult should have in modern day, and it's dying. I mean, it is. We're becoming, and I hate saying this, and this might offend some people, but remember the movie Wall-E, where everybody's on that floating cruise ship going through space, and they can barely move because everything is handed to them. That is literally the direction we're going. And some people might think, "Oh, that's crazy. That's not the direction." But the world is becoming easier and making our lives easier, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but how we're pursuing it. Like, kids are relying on AI to write their entire school paperwork. I never had that in my youth. I struggled. And yet one button, like, make my paragraph sound good, because that's changing how we produce results in a short amount of time in so many factors. And we need struggle. Youth needs struggle. And they need, that's my biggest conveying factor if I had a kid, is I'm not going to make your life necessarily easier. I'm going to make it where you understand how to get out of a situation, you learn, you adapt, you overcome.
How would you do that for a child?
To make them hop on that dirt bike, you go over that berm, send it, and I'm not going to come running to you and rub your head saying, "Oh, we're done riding. Like, you're going to get back on that bike. You're going to ride some more." It's the helicopter parents. And once again, I have no room to say I'm a parent right now, because I'm not a parent. But my parents did a valuable lesson in my youth, and that was to be outside, to go try to jump that creek, whether I make it or not, to go climb up in that treehouse and frankly fall out of that treehouse. It's those small steps of where there was risk, there was danger, and you learned how to mitigate that in some ways. In other ways, you didn't. But it literally built this tunnel of resilience to your adulthood. And today, you get handed an iPad, you get handed a cell phone, everything is doing this, and then when you get put in an emergency situation, that's the survivability goes down. If you grabbed an 18-year-old out of 1944, stuck him in the forest, said, "I need you to survive for 5 days," there's a pretty high probability that they would survive. If you stuck an 18-year-old today in the same situation, I would say that probability is very low.
I tend to agree with you, and I think it has less to do than with the actual knowledge or skill set of surviving in the wild than it does with self-confidence and mental resilience.
Yes.
Because you start giving up hope in the wild, and you sink pretty fast. Your survivability rate goes right down the tube, and you go back a number of years where risk was a part of the everyday life, and you start realizing that, to quote Fight Club, you're not made out of glass, you're carved out of wood, whatever it is. You can actually you can do some things with yourself and make it through. And I notice, like, in our society, I think people are cluing into this, because this whole bubble wrapped system that we have, I'm looking at play areas for youths being constructed specifically with the idea of introducing controllable risk. They're going to have heights, and they're going to be falling, and they might hurt themselves, and they're going to have things that they can climb up. They're not all enshrouded. And I, I think from a larger level, people are realizing that the resilience of our youth has taken a massive blow. I think that your solution of putting them on a dirt bike or doing something with some level of controlled risk is the solution. And you got helicopter parents who'll fly over top and try and take care of everything. They got lawnmower parents who will like mow down all the problems ahead of their kids, so the kids got this nice path to work down. And I've never seen a more depressed generation
Yes.
than these kids who've never felt like they've actually earned it on their own. Like their decision mattered, that their consequences of their actions were something that they could feel the relief for the failure from and learn from.
The biggest issue too is that, with the advancement of technology, there's a lot of things that are wonderful because of that. I'm not dissing on technology, but everything is instant. People get instant replies, instant on social media. Everything is then therefore developed the youth into everything is instant. So when that instant process doesn't come, such as working out and getting in really good shape, or finding ways that instead of actually doing it the natural way, they're going to all these other methods of, I like fitness and I'm based off fitness, but I don't have anything to show for fitness, as far as I don't need to do all these types of medical concoctions that a lot of these 18-year-olds are doing just to be instantly in this great shape, rather than simply working out over a period of time. The whole realm of modern day instant gratification is, I think, at an all-time high. Everything has to be done faster. Everything has to be instant. And that's instant is not good necessarily. It helps in some ways. I think it hurts in other ways. You look at like the actual cultivation of a friendship, a relationship, any of those prospects back then were done in a way that was genuine. The swipe right, swipe left aspect is absolutely killing the dynamic of human interaction. It's absolutely killing actual progressive friendships that last decades. And for me, what if it's that bad now? What are we going to do 20 years from now, 30 years from now? What is it going to be? Is this the whole interaction of humans going to transverse from actual human to human interaction, and people are going to simply be talking to a robot that's programmed to show empathy? It's weird. And for me, I'm not looking forward to that. Hence why I'm going to hop on my 50-year-old motorcycle and go ride to Cars and Coffee to actually talk to someone.
I see that being the commodity of the future. I can see, past podcast guest John Sinai, he's a futurist, and I saw something pop up recently in his social feed, and he's talking about how people aren't falling in love in the way that they used to. And his reasoning behind that is that their dopamine system's been hijacked, and they're looking for that instantaneous, quick, here you go, next thing. And they're so overloaded that they don't allow themselves the ability to, let's say, fall in love like people used to. And you talk about talking to an AI system. I remember reading an article, I think it was a year, maybe it was 2 years ago, and this is when AI is kind of coming up, and they said, this dating app, I don't know which one it was, but you can create your own AI avatar, and then you let it go out, and your AI avatar, you program it with your likes, your wants, your dislikes, whatever, right? Will go and date other AI avatars, and then it'll find a match for you based on the AI things dating, and then you can, if you wish, now talk with that person behind a screen or maybe meet them up,
I'd
meet the person
unplug
up
the
in real life.
computer. The computer's going.
Holy crow. No kidding. No kidding. Yeah, but I do see this the face to face, the social interaction, because even like this technology is great. You're where? You're in Colorado right now?
Yeah, I go between Colorado and Florida.
Okay. And I'm in British Columbia, and we're able to have this conversation like we're in the same room, more or less. We're going to be missing out on some of the nuances and the actual connection, but it helps proxy that for a fair way. Like that's fantastic. The younger generation, I find they don't really want to do that. If they have a video going out, it'll be a one-way feed. It'll be them talking about what's going on. Most of it's going to be texting, and of the texting, it's going to be little emoticons and slang and whatever else. That level of connection has drastically changed. I think, I do believe you're right that having these real world interactions is going to be something that's going to be the hot commodity of the future. I don't see that pendulum swinging completely before it starts coming back. Something's going to happen. And it's going to take people with real traditional skills like yourself who know how to turn a wrench, who can understand how an engine works, who understands their relationship with fear so that they can do things that might otherwise be scary and get through it. I think that sort of I think that sort of archetype is going to be coming back into favor. The idea of toxic masculinity, I think, is well on its way out, and the idea of toxic people is better understood. I gotta wonder though. So you talk about being put in a situation where everything's absolutely out of your control, and you just have to start reasoning and figuring your way through it and gritting down. When was the first time that happened for you?
Well, I mean, very first time, I photoshopped my report card in, the 6th grade, and we had parent-teacher conferences, and I knew my D-Day time was coming up because I normally didn't get B's and A's. And I didn't correlate that the parent-teacher conference was the same week that I had photoshopped that report card. So that was a stressful situation, and that was my first time, I'd say.
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
far
that'll
as
be a good one.
adulthood, well, let's see. One situation that always sticks with me, and it's actually hilarious. I had bought an early 70s jet boat. Typical Craigslist purchase, looks fast. This is a really dumb idea, but the looks fast part is the most important aspect out of this ordeal. Buy this jet boat. First day out on the lake. It's got a 455 big block board to, I think it was like a 502 or something like that. Beautiful jet boat. I got it for an absolute steal. We're out in the water, and I was like, this thing's fast. I mean, it's real fast. And I'm sitting out there on the lake, and I'm like, but the angle is concerning. Why is my angle like this? Keep in mind, I am completely new to boating. Never have done it before, but I go buy the dumbest thing you could buy in a boat. Didn't start in a canoe, just went straight to the jet boat. Well, apparently at some point there is the most important thing. That is the plug. And I sat there and I watched that. Why is the angle of this boat increasingly? And I initially thought I had bought a bad boat. This thing is sinking. Well, normally you would just abandon ship. And at that point I was analyzing, okay, the risk is high here. Their situation is emergency and dire. I'm going to lose this boat. It's going to be at the bottom any minute. And the water temp isn't that great. Well, I decided that it's still running. I had decided to go wide open throttle, and it planed out. It removed the water, even though it was going to still sink, and I beached it. That situation, after I beached it, I essentially saved the boat. I realized that my stupidity was still strong because I forgot the plug. But it was a situation that could have been much worse. And I realized that by just, instead of giving up, analyze the situation, figure out a solution, make it happen. And it doesn't always work. But in this case, early on in my teens, that method worked.
At that age, you're like, what the hell? I don't know what's going on. I got nothing. I don't know about the trim. I don't know that. I guess you learned, by putting throttle on, you'd start draining the boat. That was more than once I've been out on a boat without a plug in it. It's like, okay, just got to let this thing go.
Every time. So I would say that was
But
probably
the
the real truly dire, like, you better do something quick and act fast and think strategically, or this is going to be Titanic episode 2.
Well, tell me about this world record, electric paramotor altitude that you set. How did that come about?
So for like when I first started flying paramotors, I was always fascinated. The record aspect of pushing the envelope, when most people would say that's crazy. And honestly, the sport of paramotoring, when you actually break it down, and if the audience doesn't know what a paramotor is, it's a powered paraglider. You essentially have a paraglider, which is fabric and string. You have a frame that you strap yourself into with gasoline under your buttocks, and an engine spinning a carbon fiber blade at a high rate of speed. Sounds absolutely disastrous, but it's like the most pure form of flying that I think I've ever done in my entire life. So I was doing this sport for a good amount of time. It was a long time I was flying. And since beginning to the point of the actual record, I've always wanted to set a record, whether I was distance, any type of feasible record that was sanctioned with the FAI, which is the Federal Aeronautic Association. So they essentially is this massive aeronautic association that's global, and they've been around since the early 1900s. Every record known to man: Armstrong's moonwalk, Armstrong's X-15 flight, Chuck Yeager's, the Wright brothers. Every record that has ever been attained is in this book. It's in this record book. Well, my objective at the time was to always get a record established and to be in that book. And not only to break a record, but to set one that has never been set before. Well, that's difficult in the sport of paramotoring because a lot of the Europeans have set all these records. I mean, they're the king of setting records, especially the Dane French. They're just good. So many friends over there, paramotor friends out of France, and I'm just like, you guys make croissants. Why can't you just focus on those and let us set some of these records? And my buddy Pascal says, well, you got to figure something out. So inevitably, my fiance now, my girlfriend at the time, she wanted to be part of this. So our goal was to set the tandem trike altitude record. That was the objective because that was held by the country of Hungary. Well, then it came into the process of that when we were talking with the Federal Aeronautic Association. They said, hey, there are some avenues that haven't been approached yet, and that is in the electric realm. And then this like light bulb turned on. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's brand new. We don't have anything down yet. And we got wind that the British were originally going to try to set this. So thanks to the amazing, this isn't just a one-man sort of thing. It's a whole team. I have friends that are just, I owe forever gratitude to because they literally made this happen. It would never happen without them. We obtained an electric paramotor that was to spec and to their regulation. It was brand new. I mean, it's still very new, and the development behind it. We chose a location that was going to work. And, the biggest thing is that one small mistake on this record, it completely invalidates it. There's so many rules. The rule book is like this thick. And I think a lot of people attempt these records, but when one thing is off, that's it. And then the process and everything it was shockingly. It's not like you can just go up, do the record, and hey, I'm done. That's it. There's a lot of pre-planning, and that was the biggest wake-up call for me. But somehow, in all that context, we got the perfect weather window, which I was shocked at because at the time frame where we took off and flew from is notorious for horrific winds. It was up in Leadville, Colorado. I mean, it's smack dab in the middle of the Continental Divide between these mountain ranges that westerly flowing winds come in and it turns into a very rough cup of soup for any pilot. So the perfect conditions happened. We got everybody gathered. We got all our sealed altimeters, which record all this data, and I can't touch any of them. You have to have an FAI specialist there. They have to monitor everything you're doing. They put the altimeters on you. and then you have to go and do your record and come back and then remove those. And if there's any, I mean, any discrepancies in between that process, that's it. The record is invalid. And I only had one shot at this. So we got up there. The winds were behaving at the time. The biggest issue that for me was temperature. I had this U.S. Air Force flight suit that was, insulated to the degree that I looked like the Michelin Man, and had heated gloves and a full mask set up with oxygen. And I look back at that and I'm like, temperature was a huge factor, because on my initial climb, I had kept watching that thermometer fall. And, when we talk about this risk to reward that we were talking about earlier on, that was always analyzing through my head, because I'd watched that temperature just drop and drop and drop. And there's a multitude of reasons why that's concerning. Battery life diminishes with temperature. Am I going to actually get to the altitude that I had wanted to objectively reach? The winds picked up. The turbulence got worse. You had all these factors. But what made the most impact was that everything in the end worked as we hoped. Even though we had all these avenues of struggle to get to that point, somehow it worked. And that's, I guess, what I perceived as don't stop, don't give up, keep pushing on. So this record happened. And in between this record, the first fiasco that happened was that I got sent up. Temperature was almost -11 with the wind chill. Everything was freezing up. The winds picked up. I got blown off course. And I'm panicking, trying to get back, because you have to get back to your original spot. You cannot land anywhere else. It has to be from where you took off to where you landed. Well, I somehow glided back pretty close, but I didn't fully make it. That would have made that record invalid if I just said, oh, we're good. So I had my buddy Jeremy put the batteries back on full charge, get any power that we can get, because I'm going to try one more attempt just to make sure that this record is invalid. He did an emergency charge. I warmed up everything that I had. My hands were frozen. My get set up again. I take back off. Winds are picking up. This is midday, middle of winter. I get up to my trajectory altitude. Originally, I was hoping for 18,000 feet, because that was just our objective. Regardless, it was going to be a benchmark set. But biggest mistake I made in that was my first altimeter that I was reading, my personal one, shut down. And that made me concerned that the other ones were shutting down. So I take my glove off, and I'm at 14,000 feet, almost 15,000 feet. Wing is collapsing. I'm getting frontals. I'm all over the place. And I'm still focusing on my LZ, which is this tiny dot. I can just see these little dots where the whole flight crew's down at the airport. And I take my glove off and I'm trying to reset my altimeter. Well, the mistake made is I had to hold my brake toggles, which control the wing. I have my throttle set at a certain percent. I can't get my glove back on. I'm sitting there struggling, and then all of a sudden my hand starts burning up, because with any temperature drop in the below zero range, you have this weird feeling where your hand gets really cold and then starts burning up. Frostbite, gangrene was like the first thing that comes through my mind. I'm like, this is not good. I'm going to be a pirate. And I somehow get my glove back on, get the heated system back on, and I continue to climb out until I get total battery shutdown. So the entire unit just powers down. And it did. It had reached its core percentage where it just powers down. The temperature was a big factor, and then I had used up my battery. Both altimeters are running. We're good. Now the problem is I have to get back to the exact spot I was, and I am a lawn dart at this point. Have no more forward power. It's just glide. So all these years of flying, I somehow remember the glide method and get back to my actual LZ, land perfectly on that dot. I remember my hands were just hurting. I was just freezing. And the first thing I asked, I'm like, can I get something to warm up my hands? And the FAI guy is removing the altimeters, and we're sitting there, and he's like, hey, I don't think this recorded the data. These are both showing blank. They're just showing numbers. And
no.
My heart just sank. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I just turned into the Coca-Cola polar bear popsicle, and nothing recorded. Well, it actually turns out it did. We double verified. And I remember I was like, I'm done with cold weather for a little while. And we finally got all the numbers back, and everybody's gathered around. They said, hey, we're good. The data's good. And that was like the biggest weight off my shoulders when I was sitting on that tarmac trying to warm up. And
no kidding.
That was fun. I would I do it again? I mean, probably yes, but the amount of work and paperwork and timing and the stress level, and once again the risk to reward ratio, you have to ask yourself, was this worth it in the end? And to me, putting an American flag on the record books as a first was a big objective because, sorry French, I just had to boot one of the flags on, put a first, and it was a really good feeling because it's like, all right, we got something over here, and because of my crew and everybody that was there helping, lending a hand, it happened because of them. It wasn't me.
Mm. What was the height you made it to?
Uh, just under 15,000. It was 14. So I think it was 963 is what the
Wow.
actual attained altitude.
Would you do it again?
Oh, 100%. In fact, we had a lot of variables that worked against us that day. Theoretically, I should have got up to about 22, 23,000, but the
Mm.
winds were so bad that day. And we have these things called um, winds aloft. And, you know, your traditional, when you're on
Mm.
the ground, you're getting hit with wind. The higher you go, based on where the jet stream is, the winds go up considerably. That day, they were pretty high. In fact, they were alarmingly high. And if the original wing that I was going to fly was significantly bigger, because the bigger the wing, the more lift you get. If I had flown that wing,
Right.
I would have been in Timbuktu. I mean, I would have been a one-way ticket to
Right.
Cabo.
Mm.
So I had to fly a much smaller wing. And in fact, the wing that I flew was like a pylon racing wing. It was an 18-meter, superiorly stable, really good in high winds, but it yields half the lift that I could have had.
Mm.
So for us to get to that altitude with such a tiny wing, that was still a benchmark that I was actually kind of shocked at. I didn't think I'd even get that high, just given the temperature,
Mm.
the battery life, the size of the wing with the winds, and yet somehow it it worked.
Why did you do it in the wintertime and not like in warmer weather?
Well, because the variables with weather, anytime you have heating of the surface of the earth causes air instability. Springtime is a super volatile time of year. You got questionable weather, warming of the surface creates these conditions that are super volatile and dangerous for a pilot. The conditions that I was already flying in
Mm.
were somewhat unstable when it came to turbulence, but as far as rising air, what we call thermals, wasn't near as violent. And, you know, the traditional paraglider thrives off violent air into thermals. My biggest
Right.
concern was that if I was to get caught in a thermal with unstable air, mix it with jet stream air or laminar flowing off the mountains, that would have
And you're up.
completely blown me off course to my original point. And once again, rule book says where you take off, you have to land on as a return.
Mm.
So winter was my choice, but every choice has a consequence. And well, you know, I'm still not a pirate yet, but I was pretty close to being old Captain Hook.
There's also an interesting story about you flying hundreds of miles in that open cockpit biplane. I think it was the AC Doocy, the P-70. I think you corrected me on that one earlier when we were chatting.
Yeah,
But you did that. You did that with your father, right?
I did.
That's interesting. Did you
Oh,
learn a thing or two about the old man on that trip?
my father's one of my best friends, and not for the reason that, you know, they don't buy you fancy stuff or any of that. He's my best friend because anytime I invite him on something, he never says no. And he
Mm.
dang well knew that this particular trip, the risk was very high and very little reward for him in his case. So
Mm.
I had the bright idea to buy an airplane, and not just a traditional, hey, this is a Cessna 172, this is going to get you anywhere you want. No, I bought one that is based off 1930s technology, and its design profile was literally based off 1930s, and decided to buy it not locally, but halfway across the United States, sight unseen, and then have the bright idea to fly it home, and the idea that it's going to make it back to my destination. So that whole idea somehow stemmed, and it happened. And my father joined me on this, which I was shocked at. My favorite moment is when we arrived to where this plane was, which was in the middle of right on the Arkansas, like Midwest or southern points, what we call the Bible Belt. And we
Sure.
open up that hangar, and there's like this big air tractor. And he's like, "Oh, this is nice." And we're walking around this shiny air tractor to the back, and there's this airplane that's just covered in dust. And I watched my dad go from happy, excited to like a total ghost. And at that moment, I like could read his mind. He's like, "I'm not making it home. I'm not making it home." And not once did he say no. But I'll never forget. I was filming, and I caught his face, and he's just like, like, this is it. This is the play. And somehow he still didn't say no. And I tell you what, there's a book that, if you love aviation, this was a book that resonated with me through childhood into my adulthood. It's called The Flight of Passage. And it's about these two boys who essentially build this Piper Cub, rebuild it, and they fly it across the United States on this adventure that you dream of as some of us as a kid. I felt like I completely relived that book on this journey. And we dealt with some of the worst winds. I mean, Kansas, holy cow. I love the people of Kansas, but you can keep that wind. I've never been code brown so many times trying to get that dang plane to set up and land. And yet every single time we made it to our checkpoints. And not only that, but at one point we were just utterly shocked how good the plane flew. I mean, it always started. It ran like a sewing machine. And I think my dad, at our last leg, he's like, when this journey started, I couldn't wait to get home because I didn't want to die. But it came to a point where he's like, I'm actually sad that we're on our last leg. We were both looking at each other. Well, not looking at each other because he's sitting in front of me. But we just we read each other. We're like, we don't want this adventure to end. This is quite possibly the greatest adventure that a father and son could ever do in their lifetime.
That is cool. And didn't you have like a malfunction with the fuel gauge on that flight?
Oh yeah, the day one, we actually, before I even left, the fuel gauge was just. I was like, oh, we just got to add some gas. So we checked the tanks. I'm like, there is gas. We added some more gas. It's still empty. And I'm like, well, this is just great. And we're in the middle of nowhere. We had realized that there are methods. So when we talked about earlier, it's find a solution to a predicament. The predicament was my fuel gauge was in fact broken. The level was not reading anymore. And the time frame to fix it would have burned up our entire time frame to get this plane home before the big weather started moving in. Well, early Piper Cubs, they didn't have a traditional fuel gauge like what you and I have in our car. Theirs was a rod with a cork, and based on where the tank is fuel level wise, it would give you where you say, oh, I'm full, half empty. Somehow we found a cork, and somehow we found a perfectly straight rod that we could bend, and we drilled a hole in the existing cap and realized this is going to work. And hilariously, fast forward, 5 years later, 4 years later, I still have that same fuel gauge. I still utilize that same gauge.
That's a good idea.
It worked.
So are you able to look out? So on a Piper Cub, you fill up on the wing, do you?
This one, the tank is, you have your engine prop, and then behind the engine is the actual tank. And it is like the smallest tank for an airplane ever. It's 14 gallons. Like, on our Speedbird, I hold 92 gallons on the fast plane. This one, it's 14 gallons. So you have to be really, really mindful of your legs because you get an hour and a half tops before you have to fill up.
And so you would look out at the fuel cap and you'd see a rod that's either sticking out all the way, halfway, or not at all. Is that, am I understanding
I'd be
that right?
because I fly, the pilot flies from the rear. And my dad, the passenger, flies from the front, or the co-pilot flies from the front. So I'm like flying. I'm like, all right, it's like the gas gauge is like there. I'm like, all right, I got like 15 minutes before it's there, and I'm like sitting there. And then, the route that we took, we tried to find the least windiest route because honestly, it's the slowest plane ever. I do 70 knots, whether I'm full power, or I do 70 knots if I'm a quarter power. It's got this huge wing. It's it was never built for speed. And at one point, coming through I'm gonna say this wrong. Okmulgee, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Sorry, I totally butchered that. But the headwinds were like 58 knots. I had a ground speed of like 16 knots, and I'm like, this is
Wow.
bad. I have to make it to this airport, and it's showing that my fuel burn is 45 minutes till I'm empty, and the duration is 54 minutes to get there.
Mm.
So you have all these things, variables that are like coming into play that you're like, is this going to work? Are we going to be in a cornfield like digging our way out?
Have you had those landings?
And I have had those landings before, and to me,
Yeah.
this journey in itself, I look almost daily. I visit that whole journey, and I just smile because it's one of those checks off the box of experiences that you cannot buy. You literally cannot put yourself in that situation by booking it through like an all inclusive. You have to literally go out and put yourself in that situation, and God hands you this book and says you're going to deal with these situations. You either survive or you don't. And that trip, filled with all these amazing memories, also tested my patience, my stress level, and in a way that I learned a lot and forever base a lot of things off in life because of that.
I'm a big fan of those kind of trips. It's so many people, they try and contrive their life an adventure in it somehow, and they'll get online, they'll find a booking agent, and they're like, look at this adventure that I'm doing. Somebody else is I'm gonna strap to somebody else, and we're gonna jump out of an airplane. Someone else is gonna fly me around. Somebody else is gonna drive me to this place, and that's good. Like I get it. That's a good step for people to go out, but I don't think they're truly experiencing life or getting the same sort of rewards that you get when you do it yourself. When you put the time in to learn, or you just try and figure it out as you go.
Yes.
So you've got another cool trip coming up. I think it's September, is it? Are we allowed to talk about this one?
Yeah,
Something to
we
do with
absolutely can.
Camel. All right. Let's fill me in on this because so I've got a couple friends and past podcast guests. They're taking a trip. I think it's from the UK over to. Oh, I'm not sure. I think it's over to Sydney, Australia, and they're taking it's called Defender X, or the Defender X challenge. Megan Hines over there with Doug Pattison, ex-CIA fellow, and it looks like a pretty cool little trip that they're on. They got these big rubber pontoons they put on that they have on the top, and they put it underneath and inflate them, and they're taking it down the Thames River and across the English Channel, and like it's pretty cool. But it sounds like you're doing something pretty freaking cool that's along the same lines.
It's these, what I always say, you're handed a deck of cards in life, and this is one of those cards that I never expected or ever anticipated I'd even get the opportunity to. But if you're ever bored or you got some time to kill and you want to watch something some of you the audience might have heard of this, it's called the Camel Trophy. Back in the 80s through the 90s, they put on this event where they had to go through these crazy routes through the most remote areas, Siberia, the Amazon, Africa, Tanzania, like all these places that man rarely survives or does well in these type of environments. And they take these Land Rovers, and it was like the Olympics, but in off-roading and adventure. This whole series lasted from the early 80s, and I believe the last one was in 96, and then it stopped. The 90s were a super special era because you had this danger in these events, Paris-Dakar Rally, the Camel Trophy, like all these events that were going on where safety was a second thought, and that really really projected adventure in a way that I don't think we'll ever see in our lifetime again. Because I mean, you watch some of these series, like we just watched the one where they were going through South America, and I mean, these guys are through this river crossing, and the rover is clearly underwater, and you see the guy, he's like poking his head out, like you should probably exit the vehicle, but he didn't. And all of a sudden it's pulling through the water, and you see him, he's like sucking the air out of the headliner, and then he's like coming through with the winch system and pulling him out, and I'm like, what the heck? And I watched this series like as a kid. It was my dream, and I thought it would never actually ever come back again. Well, go figure, a year and a half ago, a friend of mine sends me this link. He's like, hey, they're bringing the Defender Trophy, which is the predecessor to the Camel Trophy, back this year for the first time. And I'm like, wait, what? Land Rover had just released the Defender a few years back, and they somehow, the media team said, we're going to bring back something just like the Camel Trophy. And I'm like, there's no way. So they had an application process, and thousands of people applied to this. And I applied, did the video interview and all this. And I'm like, hey, I tried. This would be amazing, but what are the probability of this actually getting selected? It's just, it's slim, but you always have to try. Well, fast forward, again, email at the beginning of this year, and I about like fell out of my chair. And it's like, hey, we've selected you to be part of the Defender Trophy. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what? So I have no idea what to expect. From what I've read, is based off the original to some degree, and a lot of the tasks at hand with navigation, building these bridges to cross certain rivers, and all these things that truly took a situation where we talked about being put in stressful situations and finding an outcome that works. That's essentially what this is all based upon, is handling stress, teamwork, leadership, and all this stuff encompassed into an adventure where you're covered in a lot of mud and questionable directions of routes, and it's going to happen. So in April, we're going up to Canada for the first, I guess what they call the part of this. And I literally have no idea. The amount of waivers that I had to sign, I was like, they're pretty serious about this, and I'm really excited. I hope that it's every bit or at least close to what the original was, so I can at least live that moment in reality.
That is so cool. So you're starting off in British Columbia, are you?
I am, yeah. And they have a whole task of things to do. As far as, they just sent the go-by sheet of navigational expectations and the type of knots that I need to know, and the type of how to utilize the winch on the new Defender. And they sent me the go-by sheet of the systems on the Defender. So I need to get up to snuff because I don't have a new Defender, and I need to get access to one. And it's truly what I'm excited about, is to meet all these other people that are, if they apply to this, they have to have the same mentality of adventure. And I think it's going to be refreshing to meet other individuals that are like, maybe they're just as enthusiastic, if not more, about this type of adventure. And I'm like, I need to meet more people like this because I thrive off this stuff.
I agree. And so this will be a televised thing, will it? Or they'll have a show behind it?
I believe that's what they're working on. I have not been told of how it is going to be captured cinematically, because Japan just did theirs not too long ago, and I saw part of the video to that, and it was incredibly well shot. And I'm looking forward to what to expect. I'm kind of hoping that at least I get to possibly roll a Defender, because they rolled the Discoveries in the 90s. Half the time they're upside down. You just like, they're great. And I'm like, I want to be in that scenario. I want to roll one of these and have no repercussions because it's not mine.
Life goals, I tell you.
Yeah.
That would be that'd be a show I could definitely get behind. I was my wife and I were asked to help and consult on a show that was filmed up here a year ago. I think it was Stallone's company. It was called Extracted, and they get these contestants, and they have to go out into the wild, and they have a home base with family members, and the family members will vote on what food they get or what they don't get. And like a lot of these shows, it's highly contrived. And we met all the different contestants and had to provide some training for them and testing, and you get a good sense of these people. They're like, oh, this person here, this gal here, and this guy over here, they're going to do really well.
Yeah.
But when the show actually runs, there's all these internal politics and maneuvering that happens, and it's got very little to do with who's capable and who's got the right mindset and who can do something. And it comes down to more this production value of it's like Survivor Part 2 type thing. Whereas a show like this, I don't think they're going to have any of those sort of games involved with all of it. And it's a good test, old school, man and machine, and ingenuity. That is something I can definitely get behind.
And that's for me is when we originally got the wind of this. I'm like, okay, this could be a good thing because there's I don't like safety, and I get it. Their PR team is probably focused on safety, but at some point in this adventure, there is going to be something unsafe because the amount of waivers, like I said, there's something in this route that has something of questionable activities, and I'm really excited about that.
I was always raised in a safety third environment, and
Yeah,
it's done okay for me. It's led to some pretty interesting stories. You make mistakes along the way, you kind of learn from them, and you course correct. But that's life. You don't go through life without picking up a few bumps and scrapes along the way.
exactly. That's the whole journey. What was that quote? It's you don't want to arrive perfectly preserved. You want to be withered and completely wrecked and say, "Wow, what a ride!" That's
So,
how I
have there
feel.
ever been any times in your life when you maybe went in a direction a little too far that later hindsight would provide you the insight that hindsight tends to do and say, well, maybe that wasn't the best idea at the time. I should have gone in a different direction.
Uh, Early on, yeah, I had a great idea to try to fly under a bridge on my paramotor.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, I got these great
Okay.
photos. And it wasn't like a bridge with a lot of clearance. The margins were, and somehow in my conscious, I was like, this is gonna work. So I set up,
Well,
I
you don't
took
do it
off.
because you think it won't work.
There was like if the thought process was 95% this is gonna work, 5% you're not gonna fit. The
Mm.
5% never became a factor. And so I took
Ah.
off on the paramotor, had a whole bunch of friends on the ground filming and videoing, and I I flew through the first bridge, which was a little bit higher, cleared that, everything was good, and I'm approached on the second bridge, and there's a river below, and with some rocks. Come through the second bridge, and I remember I was looking, I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be tight." And you're at the point where I can't abort. Either I just go straight in, or I try to get under. Well, I made it under, but the top half of my wing completely snagged the bridge. And I remember flying,
Oh.
and I remember this, it like felt like an ejection seat. I'm like, "Uh-oh," and I had swung up, and I could see my wing stuck up on the bridge there, and then I swung back down, and then the wing became detached, and I came crashing down into the ground. And I got this
Wow.
iconic shot where you see these cement pillars, and you see me. First shot, I'm here, everything's good. The second shot, you see me up here, and my wing is like stuck on the top of the bridge. I'm like mid swing.
Oh, man.
This is the best
Oh,
shot.
man.
I was like,
What was going through your mind then?
I should have stayed home.
Were you at least wearing a life jacket if you're going over water?
I had a granola bar and my water bottle, and I remember laying on the ground with this like practically disintegrated paramotor. I was completely fine, but it was costly. It was one of those things. I look back, I'm like, why'd I do that? This company had just sent me this new wing, this prototype wing, and I was like, that's 5 hours on it. It was brand new, and I just completely shredded it. It looked like a confetti party, and I'm like,
Um,
you did not think this through. Like what? Why? What? At what point was the reward to get through this bridge going to grant you? Nothing. Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, did they give you a new wing after that?
No. In fact, I lost that
They did.
sponsorship because I forwarded. I sent them photos like, "Hey, any chance I could get a replacement?" And they're like, "We needed you to send us back for evaluation." I'm like, "I can send it back," and that was it of that one. So, I one of those scenarios, just like I look
Oh, they're
back at it.
missing the mark on that one.
Hey, I'll
I
send
don't
you that
know.
photo sometime. You'll crack up. You see me like midway.
Yeah, 100%. I want to see that one. Um, I read something about a helicopter and a laser pointer in your youth. Is that something that, I've done a lot of silly things, which I never thought about consequences when I was younger. I still kind of do some silly things, but it looked like the state tried to make an example out of you on this one.
Yeah, that was a era of youth where once again you're like, I didn't think this one through. So Indian buddy of mine, remarkably smart software developer. He's working on a FLIR system, which is a heat sensitive type of digital imagery. And he had this laser system that we're using HVAC units on the top of buildings as a range. It's a fairly powerful laser. Somehow the mix of that system and tracking sources of heat with this laser system and having it on a follow setup that would follow the highest point of heat in the program that he had, mixed with a few shots of tequila and hanging out on a rooftop.
Yes, as one does.
We talk about Code Brown, is one of those scenarios. Turns out the heat source of the exhaust of a Bell Jet Ranger is significantly hotter than the exhaust of an HVAC unit on a building. And I'll vividly remember, I was like, why is the beam following that way on that moving target versus the HVAC unit? And I remember he had pulled the like, it was like this power pack plug setup. And the system was big. It was just on this, I got a photo of the system. It was remarkable what he's doing. He was trying to sell this system to a company that he was in hopes to make a lot of money off of it. It didn't go as planned, and nothing actually came of it originally. You know, it happened, it tracked onto it, and we're like, that wasn't good. Because remember, we like illuminated the aircraft, and I was like, we thought about it a little bit, and then we didn't. We're like, okay, that was it. It was only a few seconds. Well, fast forward, we get a knock, and I'll never forget. I got that knock on the door, and I was like, these three guys, and they weren't even in like suits; they were just in regular civilian clothes. And I opened the door, and they show their ID, and it's the FBI, and I'm like, what is this? I know I paid that parking ticket. I was like absolutely confused. And this is not like next week or the week after. We're talking almost a year. And he says, okay, do any of these images? And he's like, can we sit down and talk with you? And I'm like, sure. Okay. And he pulls out this stack of paper, and you see this beam from the top of this building. And at first you see a beam, and then it's just this total whiteout. He's like, does this look familiar to you? And at the time, it didn't register me. I'm like, I'm still confused, but okay. He's like, this came from your residence, and we need to talk. And so at the time, I talked with them, and I gave him all the details, and I showed him the part of the system, because he had at that time, my friend had already left. He was on a visa, and he was back into his country and working on another project, because this was a year and something later. And I explained the whole situation, and at the time it didn't register the severity of it. And I was in aviation, and you just don't think about that. And the severity was very high. Let's just put it that way, because it followed suit with like, hey, we're going to make an example out of you. And I'm like, guys, I'm not like this. I fly air shows, and this was a mistake. But they don't see it that way. They want to nail and portray it as like to others, which I completely understand. Don't do this. We'll make an example out of you. That's
the impression I got. Was that it was a new law in the books, and they were trying to make an example.
Cleanest record. I have like a few speeding tickets, and that was it. And they were gonna the outcome of this, comparative to like other crimes, you could essentially rob a bank and get off with less. That's how severe they're taking this. And every avenue that we were trying to portray, like, look, there was alcohol involved. I will say that was my first mistake. Number two is we didn't think this through. We didn't think this through with the system. That was mistake number two. Number three is my buddy was not there with me. It was all on me, and because it happened. So there's a lot of variables, like, why didn't we do this in a park? Why didn't we do this at your place? Not mine.
Right.
Short, by the grace of God, they finally came to their senses and realized, why are we going to ruin, at the time I was pretty young, this kid's life?
There's no malicious intent.
There was no, it was truly an honest mistake. And I was like, I am never touching something like this ever again. Ever. I won't even, like, that was like a month and a half of Code Brown. every day. Is what I
But
call it.
wasn't that the first time in that state that they actually followed through with trying to do something? So if so, wouldn't that be another record that you hold?
Well, it wasn't even with the state. It was actually it went like it was federal.
Federally, federal, of
Yeah,
course, yeah, the FBI,
and
yeah.
I'm like, this is not good. So, by the grace of God, and I don't know what happened or what unfolded, or what changed the perception. They dropped the initial, um, what they wanted to pursue, the charge they want to pursue,
Hmm.
and then on top of that, I got fined $20, which I still don't
Hmm.
understand. Of all the, I mean, when you talk about the severity and the actual precautions
Okay.
and the time frame that would have set me back, I I don't know what happened in that realm because the outcome should have not happened that way. Even though I didn't mean to, it was a mistake. It still happened, and they still had the full
Mm-hmm.
authority to pursue this, and they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Freaks me out to
Mm-hmm.
this day. I look back at it, and I'm like, maybe there was another reason why this went the way it did, because it's like maybe you have a journey ahead of you that needs to be pursued.
I'm a very strong believer of that. Not only that maybe there's a journey ahead of you that needs to be pursued, but also in that journey, something's going to come up and you're going to remember this moment and you're going to make maybe a little bit different decision as to how you proceed forward.
And it comes down to, I've always been told, even before this happened, you'll have a moment in your life that completely reshapes how you perceive everything, how you pursue everything, how you formulate your life in the direction that you want it to go. Those were one of those moments where I was
Hmm.
like, okay, you need to really analyze your actions. You need to really analyze the environment that you're putting yourself in. Alcohol rarely mixes well with this type of equipment. Alcohol rarely
Hmm.
mixes well with this type of pursuant. Kind of like you have a gun in your hand and you're doing shots. Is that a smart idea to
Hmm.
play Wile E. Coyote? And no. Same thing with this. And it really made me analyze like risk to reward. There is zero reward
Hmm.
for this, but the risk is ridiculously high.
I find it interesting that it took a year for them to kind of come back and figure this out. And I gotta wonder if the risk adverse youth that we have nowadays might also be a byproduct of the technology we have. Because everyone's got a phone, everyone can film this. There's cameras on most street corners, it seems, in major cities.
Yes.
AI, holy crow, they're
Oh,
they're already looking.
facial
If they haven't
recognition? Are
done it
you
all,
kidding me? That freaks me out. Like, and I worry
huge.
that there's going
But
to be errors in that system where like one guy's face matches up to the guy that did the heist at the bank, but he was at the King Supers grocery store. You know?
they don't even really need facial recognition anymore. I mean, if with digital wallets and digital IDs, it's like, oh, this person's been buying a lot of fertilizer from stores, and I think maybe they're going to be doing something with that, or
Yes.
they have AI, large learning model programs for pre-crime prediction, kind of like Minority Report. Well, they're looking at a lot of this kind of stuff on social media, and they think their politics are leaning to this side, and they're in this sort of a geopolitical area, in this sort of
It
environment, and
freaks me out to some degree. I know it's good for other things, but like the flock camera system that they talk about where it takes a photo of your face in your car and it's like, why were you at this corner, and it sends all that data out to these other companies that acquire that data. I'm like, do you know? So now they know if you wipe with your right hand or your left hand with your butt. That
mm-hmm.
freaks me out. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I mean, because maybe it's not being built with malicious intent, but those with ill intent will use it for their gain.
yeah.
And whether that's, I can market to you better, I can specifically have something tailored right to you that I know you're going to want to buy because I know exactly what your habits and hobbies are,
Yes.
to the idea of predictive crimes. It's scary. Oh, we're just going to come by your house because we have a high likelihood that you're going to be doing something silly here. You
There
said
was
something to somebody, and
Yeah, there was a movie. I don't know what it was called or who was in it, but it would had a software system or anything that predicted a crime before it actually happened. And
Minority Report with Tom
thank you.
Cruise.
I should know that.
Yeah.
I always say movies, as ridiculous as some of them are usually a common tall tale of what the future is going to be like. And one of those would be such as Terminator. Mark my words. We'll have this conversation. This podcast will be put in the vault, 50 years, 100 years from now. It's going to be a real thing. And Boston Dynamics, you look them up, which seemed to begin with as a harmless, noisy, walking four-legged dog, now has a 50 cal and small rocket pods mounted to it. Hello.
But my opinion, have you ever had the conversation with AI about what that'll actually look like?
I'm too scared to find out.
We're way easier than that. They don't need to be coming at us with guns. They don't need to be coming at us with flamethrowers and the T-1000. They can just psychologically manipulate people into being a bunch of sheep, into fighting each other, into
that scares me.
I mean, it can control traffic flows and dams and water sources. And I mean, if you play that scenario out with AI, there's a much more probable and a much easier way forward if technology wanted to do what happened in Terminator than fighting each other with guns. And the thing is, most people wouldn't even know it's happening.
If there's one aspect that I wish I had, would that be a time machine? Because the technology part scares me, and the simplicity of life in some aspects back in the day, I think really made the quality of life and the predictability. I think we're starting to guarantee predictability of certain aspects of how we conduct our lives, and that's terrifying to me. I don't like that.
Do you have any favorite books or favorite movies?
Yes. Favorite movies. Probably one of my... I love The Great Waldo Pepper. Have you ever seen that? It's with Robert Redford. It's takes place in the 1920s. Phenomenal. Okay. It's about a guy that is given a lot of things thrown in his lap from a pilot perspective, and they don't go the way that he hoped. And he comes to a point in his life where he's hit his pinnacle, and it just resonated on a lot of ways of trials and tribulations. I think that's a movie that I really appreciate. Obviously Apollo 13 is childhood for me, but my fiance gets so mad because we'll be, watching a movie and she'll go make dinner. I'll be starting to play Apollo 13 and she'll be like, "You just watched this 2 days ago."
You know all the words.
Everything. I think that was a movie that really resonated with me because in the time of where your outlook looks very grim when it comes to survivability, somehow you make things work. And it's not just once, but multiple avenues of desperation and things thrown against you, and yet you make it work.
Well, I'm going to have to watch you call it The Great Waldo Pepper?
Great Waldo Pepper. It's phenomenal.
Okay, I'm going to watch
it. I like weird movies. I don't have any new movies that I'm really nuts about. One, it's old and people probably find this as cheesy and as boring. It's called Strategic Air Command. It's with Jimmy Stewart. It was shot in 1955. Some of the best flying scenes of this particular aircraft it's called the B-36 Peacemaker. And it's this giant airplane. Absolutely like a time when engineers were given something in their coffee and it wasn't coffee, and they came out with these aircraft that just completely blew the mind. And it was really well shot. It was dynamic behind the actual script. Resonated with me because it's a guy that has his life figured out. He's a pro ball player and was formerly Air Force, and he gets pulled back in to the Air Force and has flying all these missions that nearly killed him. And he's just he just got married and he just had a baby, and where he thinks his dreams are falling apart soon. Actually, I'm not going to give the movie away, but
okay.
Watch it sometime. It's I think it's well shot. Like I said, it's 50s type monologue or criteria, so it could be cheesy to some people, but if you actually invest into it, it's a good.
I'm all for that.
What about you?
I don't know. I've always liked The Man Who Would Be King. I like the old Kipling book, and then the movie with Michael Caine and Sean Connery, and they're just couple guys out in an adventure doing their thing. They want to be kings of Kafiristan.
Oh, I
That's
love that.
always, yeah. So you've read it or you've seen that one, have you?
I've not seen that. I've heard the name, and I kind of have an idea if I saw a cover that I would recognize the one that you're talking about.
It's kind of cheesy by today's standards, but they figured that they're in India, and India's too. There are a couple of British officers, and India's too small for big men of their character, and they are just off to the next adventure. They're heading over to a fictitious place of Kafiristan, I think it was, and they teach the different tribes how to fight and win over their enemies, and end up becoming rulers of this one large tribe over there. So just the adventure of going off and doing something, I've always liked that sort of thing. And as a kid, the book that I always liked was My Side of the Mountain. Just a kid who.
My Side of the Mountain. That was that part of the Hatchet series?
I don't think it was, but it was just similar along the same lines, right? And it was Sam Gribley going off and running away from home and living in the woods, and then that spoke to me.
Yes, My Side of the Mountain. I read that as a kid.
Yeah. I ended up stealing that book from my school because I loved it so much, and I got caught by my teacher in the process of stealing it. And I think it was grade 4, I think it was, whatever it was. Anyways, the teacher catches me and, what are you doing? Oh, this is my book. This is your book? I mean, this is the same class copy book that we all got here, right? And, oh, no, this one's mine. I'm just lying my face off, and teacher looks it opens it up, and it said the school's name in the front, and so he rips that page off, and it says, well, I guess it is your book. Hands it to me. I'm like, oh, that teacher's pretty cool. But teacher realized I really liked it, and I ended up giving it to me. So that was, still have that one kicking around here somewhere.
That's amazing.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should talk about?
I think it's based on, who your audience is and whatnot. I'd say the number one thing is, we have these great ideas that formulate in our heads, and we actually get to so far as I think I can make this happen, whether it's a trip, whether it's that hike you wanted to do or the mountain you wanted to climb, or for some, you've always wanted to get your pilot's license. And I think a big factor that plays in a role for a lot of people, obviously, is age is one factor. Oh, I'm too old for that. I hear that so many times in a lot of the activities that we do. That kind of saddens me, because I think the capabilities of us as we get older, they say, oh, you slow down, and that is a mindset. And I think, for anyone listening to this, is if there is truly an adventure that you have always wanted to do, lay out the reasons as to why you think you can't do that, and really focus on those and ask yourself, are these actually realistic reasons, or is those reasons that I'm just telling myself so I don't do this? Because you'd be shocked. Now, I don't know anybody's circumstances, it could be health or any of that, but I would say majority of the individuals, they'd probably be surprised that they are still capable, and still that dream can happen, and that adventure still can be acquired. And there's a lot of woo-woo of believe in your spirituality and it'll come to you in due time. That's not true. The time is now. You can't keep we constantly put stuff off. Procrastination is the worst habit of the human race, and I am myself. I do that daily still, and I try to correct and catch myself. But when it comes to true adventure and the removal of regret, write down your bucket list. And this could be a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade bucket list. And write down what you want to do that would make you happy, and things that you've always wanted to do, and find a way to make that bucket list box checked off every single time.
Nathan, I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoy that message at the end. I'm sure we're going to make a clip out of that one. Thank you so much for being on the Silvercore podcast.
Thanks for having me on here. It was great talking with you, and I love environments like this, and just to meet other great creative people that have that same mindset. We need more of it.
Likewise, brother, and I'm looking forward to seeing you and your fiance when you're up here in BC. That's the next big adventure there.
I will be sure to call you.
Excellent.
Great talking with you.